First slide over. When you work as partners to build a safety-first culture, when you plan extensively, listen attentively, communicate efficiently, and execute with precision, the outcome leads to success. Building 27 at the Port Hope conversion facility. It's the project scope included demolishing the abandoned contaminated processing facility known as B27. The building was a UF6 uranium processing plant consisting of a 2-story building sections and a central 7-story section building, total footprint of 73,000 square feet. Initially, scope had a start date of June 2019, demolishing the tower of the 7-story building to the 4th floor, and the estimated completion was 2021. However, in March of 2020, the pandemic hit and the project was delayed until 2021. And with a completion date of 2024. By late 2021, Cameco had reconsidered the plan and redesigned the scope to include the demolition all the way down to the slab.
So Building 27 demolition is it's a part of a project that Cameco is undertaking called the Vision in Motion project. Vision in Motion project is essentially a cleanup program at our site. Which includes obviously the demolition of multiple buildings, 27 included. This project is kind of stemmed by the opportunity that we have to get rid of some, I guess, hazardous materials, contaminated waste at the long-term waste management facility in Port Hope.
I'm Dave Ingalls. I'm the general manager of the facility here in Port Hope, and I've worked for Cameco for about 30 years. I actually started here as a student. Building 27 was kind of Canada's first UF6 plant that was built. It was built in the early 1970s, and it ran until the early 1980s, actually, when we built the current UF6 plant. So at that time, that plant was decommissioned. But it sat there for many decades, actually, until recently when we were able to have an opportunity to take the building down and finally decommission it. Our site here, we make uranium hexafluoride, and UF6 is used as the feed material for enrichment for nuclear reactors around the world, for the fuel for nuclear reactors. And that was one of the key milestones of that project, was to remove that old building from our site and doing it safely. So that project is to really clean up our site, remove some redundant buildings from our site, improve the waterfront for the community to be able to enjoy the waterfront that we're on here in Port Hope.
So as Dave said in that past video, this facility was it was operating. It actually operated, or it sat idle quite a bit longer than it actually operated. So when they decommissioned it, you know, they saved out what they could. The new facility was built, and as you guys can all imagine, you know, operators kind of walked across the street, shut the lights off, and made sure that you know, it was an environmentally safe stage, but like I said, it was not fully decommissioned by any stretch. So so what we did is, and this is kind of some of the pre-work that we had done before Ryan and his crews and everybody got in. So we designed. So on our side, we have that client engineering team. We have those client environmental teams, safety teams, as was kind of mentioned in one of the previous presentations. So we designed an HVAC system. It was a modular HVAC system for this building. It was built for, it could be modular, different zones, to be able to get folks in this building. One of the first steps was you know, a very extensive asbestos remediation program. The facility, you know, just by the nature of the process, had lots of insulated vessels, a lot of insulated pipes. So that was a big big effort to start. The next step that we undertook is we brought back some of the old boys that used to operate this plant that may have been retired in the past. You know, they could remember, you know, maybe on night shift something spilt in the back corner, and you know, we want to go make sure we take a little more care over there. You know, what we did then is we got it was more about first breaks in our lines, vacuuming out our vessels, retrieving all the high hazard materials as best we could at the time. Built a scrubber for these first line breaks. One of the main risks was HF gas in the building, so the scrubber was used so that, you know, we could mitigate that risk. And actually, so back to the subject matter experts. So those are folks that we retained actually through the entire course of the project. We still retain them for different efforts today, and I think it was a real key. It was a real key set of resources to have to help support the contractors that were working in that building, help support the planning work. So a couple photos here. The one on the left, like I had talked about, was the HF scrubber. So like I said, we designed that in-house, installed it. We deployed it to certain areas of the building to help with our hazardous material removals. The picture on the right is kind of just a snippet of how we built our ventilation system. Like I said, it was a modular system, HEPA filters. We could deploy them different floors of the building, different zones that we might need.
So here's some details of the project. The first step in the demolition was to establish a waste processing area on the ground floor of B27, where the demolished materials from all the areas of the building could be processed. There's 3,300 super sacks you can see in the photo here, but the whole interior of the building, all the contents, all the equipment, steel piping, ducting, all that stuff, it had to be assumed as contaminated material and meet the waste criteria. So large equipment slated for the demolition had to be cut to fit into hazardous waste bags at the workplace. Contents were packaged as required and shipped to the long-term waste management facility. And in general, the waste materials all had to be cut 24 inches or less, with void spaces minimized. We cut every pipe like lengthways to fit in the bag and make sure nothing was caught in there. It was a very tedious process, you could say. So once we actually fit all the material into a bag, there was a very detailed label go on it. When it goes to the waste management facility, it gets recorded and tracked and loaded into shipping containers and transported there. Here you can see a couple of photos of the floors when we were done. The building was probably the cleanest it ever was when we were done the interior, call it demolition of the building. And we'd scrape up any remnants on the floor if there was any. There was some, not much, but there was some. And then we prepared the building to tear it down. So we scaffolded the entire building because the building was, of course, clad in asbestos transite panels just to top it all off. So when we took those panels off, we had to make sure that we didn't let any dust escape from that project. Very close to Lake Ontario, and this facility is basically right in the town of Port Hope. If there is such a thing as downtown Port Hope, but it's in downtown Port Hope. So then we had to take the siding, or take the scaffolding down as we took the building down. Time lapse.
Since the waste was going to the long-term waste management facility, it had to be, every piece, every vessel, every pipe had to be split open. There could be no voids in anything that we sent. And it had to be cut to specific sizes. So there was processing that went on. We didn't just cut out big lines and throw them in bins. We had to cut everything down to specific sizes, load it into super sacks, weigh those super sacks, V-number those super sacks, and ship them out. And everything was recorded, from where that piece of equipment came, what floor it was on, what it used to be. Everything was recorded down to every single pipe. And in the end, we had in excess of 3,300 super sacks that were shipped off this site, that all asbestos paneling went in. There were very few bins of material. When it came to the structural steel, even some of that had to be processed down to small pieces and put into super sacks because it was so highly contaminated.
So as you guys can see in that photo, you know, that scaffold tower was quite something. One of the major risks that we had identified was dusts, and like Ryan said, we're on the water in town. You know, once that transite paneling was down, next steps was thorough scanning efforts. You know, we could not be taking that down until we knew for sure that everything was clean. A lot of this steel had fixed contamination embedded. It wasn't able to be decontaminated. So we said everything loose was captured, locked down, and essentially prepared for building demo.
Here's a what do you call this? Time lapse of the building demolition on the right. But so we started at the top on the 7th floor, and we deconstructed the building using the top-down method, floor by floor. This included the transite siding and structural steel. Because no debris or equipment was permitted to leave the footprint of the building before being packaged, the team created an opening in the lower level roof to crane the super sacks into the processing area. No water could leave the footprint of the building, even after the building was open to the elements. All the water was collected in totes and sent for evaporation. Steel total was 990 tons from the 7-story building and the 2-story buildings. Some of the photography on this job was not allowed to be used, so we could only use certain portions of it that was edited.
Yeah, we couldn't bring all the, I guess, the nuclear technology constraints. I guess we couldn't bring a lot of the before and after shots for you guys, but we tried to kind of bring our best. So.
Cameco had developed internally engineering procedures as far as air quality in the building. There were, I think, 58 negative air machines set up in a huge ventilation system. All of our workers were in full-face respirators or half-face respirators while they worked there, Tyveks.
So Michelle kind of touched on this. You know, everything that we did in this project was revolving around, you know, doing this work safe for personnel and for the environment. You know, we engineered controls, eliminated the risks that we could, where we could. You know, in the end, you're still, you know, all the folks in that building are wearing full PPE, PAPRs, Tyvek suits, decontamination efforts, you know, coming and going in that building. You know, thousands and thousands of hours worked on this project with zero lost time. It's a big deal. I'm very proud of that.
The support and the morale on site is incredible here at Cameco. Everyone is so supportive. Everyone is here to help each other. The help that we get from Cameco, knowing what we're going into, the contaminations that we're facing, so that we're aware when we go into the building as the torch crew, as the fire watch, as the cleaners, we know exactly what we're stepping into, how to prepare for it, how to deal with it. The morale on site is incredible. Everyone gets along really well. Everyone knows they're there as a team, we work as a team, and we get the job done.
So the big news here is the collaboration. When you work as partners to build a safety-first culture, and when you plan extensively and listen attentively, communicate efficiently, and execute with precision, the outcome is success for all. It was very important for PDI staff to know that they were doing the work in an environment where it was safe, where they could go home at night and not have any debris on their clothing or boots. So there's quite stringent rules on getting into the work site and getting out of the work site around that. It was a bit of a new thing for Priestley with the whole radiation protection. The statement of trust between Cameco and Priestley was reached at an early stage and created a great success for the project. And the mutual respect for each other's area of expertise, the collaboration on the engineering, the rigorous safety protocol. Cameco needed to become familiar with demolition, and Priestley needed to become familiar in the nuclear space to really build a culture within the teams. The deconstruction process, planning and processing of the waste, and the equipment destruction and demolition. It really goes a long way, and sometimes when you work for all of these different clients and different types of projects, sometimes you have to go in and get this job done in short amount of time, like taking a bridge down over a highway, you got 8 hours, and then sometimes it's a time material job and they don't want you to go fast. Sometimes it's this kind of job, that kind of job. This was a bit of a new job for Priestley, and you know, we're pretty comfortable with working with lead and asbestos and contaminated soil, but there was a little bit of hesitation with the radiation on this project, so didn't want to come out like, you know what I mean, highly radioactive. But, you know, through Cameco leading us, guiding us on what they do and how they work on a regular basis, it really became quite obvious after working there for 5 years, you could hardly get anyone to want to leave that job. First, it was having a hard time getting guys to actually want to go to that job. And then after, like, the project was winding down, it was hard to get people to actually want to leave. That's how much they're enjoying the collaboration. So it was just a big point there for us.
The workers in the building specifically had to, you know, work as a team, so they were watching out for each other. Every day when they left, went through donning and doffing, decontamination as they left the building. They literally vacuumed each other off to make sure there was no residual product on them, which there was, to ensure that they didn't get any radiological uptakes or anything like that. I think the most important part is the collaboration with the client on this. We were following all of their procedures that happened on this project. The most dangerous part of taking away contamination and remove the interior, that was vital that we worked together. They had subject matter experts that could tell us what used to be in a vessel before we demolished it, to protect our workers and to deal with that material safely. We really worked together on developing all of the JHAs that were required, procedures that were required to do the demolition safely. I get a little jumped up. I'm sorry. I was just really proud of them. They're a great group of people. Yeah, there's a lot of great people that worked on this project. Everybody from the guy that changed the 48 NAM filters every day to people who cleaned the lunchroom and made sure that we had drinking water and clean our washrooms, to the guy that made the last cut on the structure of that building. When that happened, we all cheered. It was great.
And that brings us to a close. So, like Connie mentioned, we won an award for this project last year at the World Demolition Awards, and you can see Andrew and myself in the photo, and there's another gentleman there from Cameco who, with his arm out, he was over the moon, George. So, Andrew, I'll let you say your final words.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank everyone for sticking it out here, kind of the last one of the day. You know, obviously this is I recognize this very unique situation, you know, from the client side, being able to present this this project to you guys with Ryan. And it's I kind of we were chatting about it just before this. You know, a lot of these lessons learned and a lot of these messages that folks are bringing the last couple of days. You know, we could pick off examples as to why, you know, where we applied that in a lot of this project and made it so successful. So yeah, it's, you know, it's a point to take away that, you know, all those presentations and all those little things you can pick off from everybody. You know, it's just great to be able to share it. So yeah, I'd say thanks.
This was the first demolition of a total demolition of a building under radiological protection. So thanks for the opportunity, Andrew.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, Andrew would be happy to answer them.
No boy.
Wayne Bagnall, I think you know me. Excellent presentation. I want to get it, Ryan, because in the 90s in the UK, my company decommissioned the first nuclear university research reactor. And one of the things that we found was a problem. They didn't want to let the arisings go anywhere. So I'm now going to tell you about 2025. At Sellafield, probably shouldn't say this, but I want to say it anyway. We now have persuaded, or I've persuaded the site to think about the arisings, not just, you know, controlled waste, low-level waste, intermediate-level waste, high waste, all the things. So Andrew, I want you to think of buildings and structures on your site as arisings, and try where you can to recycle and reuse on site, as opposed to schlepping tankers up and down and trucks up and down the road. I mean, you know, the city's great, but crossing the road's like a dynamic risk assessment unless you wait for the white guy who doesn't always appear. So great job, and I understand the reticence and getting people in, but I felt it. So yeah, just that's my message that I've used in the UK, and I hope you think about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's, you know, that came up quite a bit too, how we can reuse and you know, instead of shipping it for long-term storage, right, it's tough. We did study after study from Cameco side of things, how to make that work, and it, you know, we've been able to recycle bits and pieces here and there if we grit blast them and all that, but it's very difficult. Yeah, it is.
Gentlemen, Eric Spiritus Worldwide, and yesterday we commended a client for standing up and talking about the near miss. What you just did is Ryan, you said, you know, hadn't done this before, and customers I'm experienced with, they don't like to hear that. They want to think that it's been done before. And so it's great that you sit up there and can say, hey, we haven't done it before, but we have done in this room and in this industry everything the first time. You know, 1,000 pot liners, 20,000 tons going out. There's no rules. We have to kind of make it up. So I'm sure you have more between the lines as you've learned, but it's just, it was great to kind of hear it, and you weren't trying to stand up there and pound your chest, oh, we're the best at radioactive dismantlement. You're the first.
Right.
So that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
It's a little bit difficult with the client too, in the sense that there's a little sensitivity to their site for obvious reasons. So when we asked them if they want to come to Sweden last year, and if we could put in for the award, and then we won, and then they asked us to present, and so we just, you know, we took a little peek under the sheets, and then we just keep reaching in a little further and get these guys a little more out of their shell. So I think it's just good for the industry as a whole, you know, it's just kind of let everyone know that it's achievable. I mean, we were a small company one day, and now we're a little bit bigger, but, you know, this is definitely a first for us, not working at a radiological plant, but to tear down a building under radiological protection. That's all. Thank you.